Welcome back to Fireside Giants with your host, Alex. Today, doing a solo video. I want to talk about a short kind of segment here about a playmaker for the Giants I think could have a really big season. Obviously, everyone's really hyper focused on guys like Malik Neighbors, Russell Wilson, talking about Jackson Dart, Cam Scatabo. Like, there's so much talent here and so many unknowns. We don't know the role Scatabo is going to play. We kind of know what Russell Wilson is. At the very least, he's an average NFL quarterback, and I think we forget what average even looks like. The deep ball should be better. There's a much different offense in store for us right now. But I want to talk about one guy that's kind of flying under the radar and a player I do believe could be a real asset for this team moving forward. That's Theo Johnson, our rookie from last year, now a sophomore out of Penn State. This is a player who I think could be something pretty good and something kind of special because he's got great size. He has obviously very, very good, run after the catch abilities. You saw him, I guess, break a number of tackles last season before he went down with that injury. I missed the final 5 weeks of the season, but in that 13 weeks, we saw his role steadily increase. And I want to say this. He was doing it with basically no quarterback. Drew Lock was not getting the ball out the way we wanted. Obviously, Daniel Jones was cut by the midway point of the season, and Tommy DeVito wasn't doing much either. So this is a player who started to show signs of life, signs of progress, despite the fact our quarterback situation was really, really bad. Similar to what we saw from Neighbors, had one of the best seasons we've seen from a rookie ever at the receiver position. I think we saw some flashes from Theo Johnson that suggest with an actual competent quarterback like Russell Wilson, who, by the way, used Pat Freiermuth with the Steelers heavily last year. I think Johnson could be one of those low-key guys that does end up breaking out this season. Just to give you some context into what his numbers look like, he finished the year with 331 yards and a touchdown. I think his red zone application could be far better. He's now 24 years old. Obviously, the Giants have been spending some late-round day 3 draft capital on tight ends. Daniel Bellinger, Theo Johnson. This year they spent a 7th rounder on Thomas Fidone. So they are stacking tight ends, guys with size, guys with athletic traits that maybe could become something. They don't want to spend a critical value pick in the first or second round on a tight end. Clearly, they feel they can get good value in the mid rounds, kind of like other teams have managed to pull off with guys like Freiermuth or even, Sam Laporta. There's plenty of value that they've managed to get from guys that weren't first round draft picks. And the Giants don't seem like they want to go in that direction. However, I do think Theo Johnson has a chance to be a really good football player. 6'6", 264 pounds. He has a really good frame, and he's a good, solid blocker. They can use him as a jumbo slot option. They can use him in line. They've even put him out wide a couple times. His snap share count, specifically 47.3% of his snaps were in the slot. So they were using him as that big body security blanket attacking the seams. You have guys like Wandale in the slot, obviously, but he's a different kind of player. Obviously, much smaller catch radius, quick outs, just zig routes, all sorts of different shorter concepts to capitalize on his agility and kind of chain moving mentality. But Theo Johnson is a little bit different. He's good on the quick outs, don't get me wrong, but I think he's such a weapon on the seam routes. And that's where I want to get his size and his frame and his catch radius involved. And I think that Russell Wilson will be better for him. I think Jackson Dart eventually will be a great gunslinger who attacks those portions of the field. He doesn't have that fear in him from attacking the seams or going, kind of fitting the ball into difficult spots. But, the last four games of Johnson's 2024 rookie season were pretty encouraging. Against the Washington Commanders in Week 9, 51 yards and a touchdown. He had 37 yards against Carolina, 39 against Tampa Bay, and then 54 against Dallas. His actual target share skyrocketed. He had 6 targets against Washington, Carolina, and Tampa Bay, and then 5 targets against Dallas. They were feeding him pretty frequently as a complement to Neighbors. So he became that insurance policy for the Giants offense, for Dable. They clearly, you could see it. The beginning of the season, he had 4 targets in week 1, 0 week 2, 2, 1, 5, 4, 0, 4, and then 6 for 3 straight weeks in 5. They clearly got him more involved. And if that's any indication of what it would have been like the rest of the season, he was starting to make a serious impact. I do think that his application to the offense moving forward, there's a wide array of places that he can make an impact. Now, he did have a bit of a drop problem. He did drop 5 passes and 43 targets, which is kind of high. It's a 14.7% drop rate, so he does need to clean up his hands a bit. I do think that that's something he probably has been working on all offseason. But his receiving depth is pretty interesting. He was very, very solid in a number of places. They really targeted him in the 0 to 9 yard range, 23 of his targets, but the medium range is where he really got a lot of action. 6 receptions on 13 targets for 94 yards. So, that was really, really encouraging that they were getting him involved in, that kind of second level. So as a receiver, there's a lot that the Giants are going to utilize a guy like Johnson for. And I think that he is someone not many people are talking about right now as one of the more important parts of our offensive scheme. And just having, different playmakers. And this is what I kind of like about what the Giants are doing right now. And I think you guys probably will agree with this, is that it feels like year one of a rebuild, in a way, right? Where Russell Wilson's like kind of this stopgap. He is a one and done piece for the Giants. And then we're going to transition over, of course, to Jackson Dart, who's going to be the long-term future and starter there. So, when you think about what the Giants offense looks like right now, next year, think about all the resources they have. And after looking at the schedule, one of the things that kind of immediately hit my mind was, thank God we have our first and second round picks. Listen, I think the Giants are going to be competitive, but competitive doesn't equal wins all the time. So even if they're not a great football team, even if they are middling, you still have your most valuable trade asset, or rather draft assets, or even trade assets if you wanted to use them to acquire already NFL proven talent to support Jackson Dart. This defense, they just spent $100 million on Javon Holland and Paulson Adebo. They just drafted Abdul Carter and Darius Alexander. They have Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, and Kayvon Thibodeau all locked up on multi-year contracts, Thibodeau being with a 5th-year option, has 2 years left, including this season. So their defense is kind of set. Like, they don't have to go out and spend big or allocate massive draft capital or money towards the defense. Now it's all about the offense. Neighbors has 4 more years of cost-controlled, I guess, price tag on him right now, which is extremely valuable. The Giants could go out into the first round in next year's draft class and add another top tier receiver to the mix here to pair with Neighbors, Slayton. We'll see what happens with Hyatt. And then, obviously you still have Theo Johnson, who I think could be a much more impactful piece. You have Cam Scatterbo, you have Tyrone Tracy. Who's to say the Giants still go out and take the best right tackle available to replace Jermaine Illuminor? Like, there are ways this team can go out and allocate resources. And you could argue they could go out and get the best possible right tackle in the draft, or draft the best possible receiver and sign the best possible right tackle, or sign the best possible receiver, or trade for the best possible receiver. There's so many different elements to this equation. It could be vice versa. In addition, this offense, though, is the kind of forming the foundation of what could be something pretty special long-term. But obviously it all predicates itself on the success of Jackson Dart. Dart has to pan out for this to work. If he doesn't pan out, we're going to see the same thing happen with Daniel Jones. I think they're vastly different players. I know some people compare them, but one of the big things I think that it's important to note when you're looking at both Dart and Daniel Jones is that Dart actually wants to throw the ball. He wants to take risks. He wants to be a gunslinger. He wants to be aggressive. And he's got that aura about him. He's got that mentality about him. That is what Brian Daboll built his entire career on with Josh Allen. The ability to be aggressive, the innate, he was born with it. It's a trait. It's in his DNA. Daniel Jones was a conservative quarterback. He took not risky throws. He checked down all the time. He was unwilling to do what was necessary to make big plays happen. That is why his ceiling was always limited. If Daniel Jones had the gunslinger mentality with his mobility and his arm strength, he could have been a good quarterback. And instead, he was conservative. He obviously did not make great decisions, and he missed open receivers all the time. So I think with Jackson Dart, why I think he has a higher chance of panning out is because he actually aligns perfectly with what Brian Daboll wants at the quarterback position, a gunslinger, an aggressive mentality. And I think that's actually going to bode really well for guys like Theo Johnson going up the seam. When you have Neighbors, let's say the Giants next year decide, hey, let's go get ourselves a big receiver, whether it's in the draft, whether it's in free agency. You have Malik Neighbors, you have another star receiver in the making, hopefully, in terms of just a pure prospect or even an NFL proven piece if you trade or sign somebody. And you have Scatterbo, you have Tyrone Tracy, you have an offensive line, hopefully that's still building and getting better. You have resources to allocate there, you can throw money. Jackson Dart, rookie contract. Now you have like stupendous amount of financial freedom long term, and the Giants are already in a really good spot with their finances. So, this team is set up. If Dart ends up panning out, this team is set up for like a decade of success. That's what this looks like. And getting that 5th-year option. Now, teams don't let their quarterbacks really get to the 5th-year option if they pan out, but it's not a bad idea to have it in case Dart does need a couple seasons to adjust. He's basically not going to have a full redshirt year this season. But I do think having like a really solid athletic, just big tight end it really takes a lot of pressure off of quarterbacks. I think, what Travis Kelce did for Patrick Mahomes was awesome. Look what Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews have done. Isaiah Likely's, coming into the league and excellent. Jared Goff and Sam Laporta. Like, look at all these really young star tight ends that are making impacts across the NFL. And the insurance policy, the security blanket that they provide for your quarterback, especially young passers in the NFL, I think is critical. Look what Zach Ertz did for Jaden Daniels last season. I mean, the Cowboys have always had really great tight ends. I mean, Dallas Goedert for Jalen Hurts. The list goes on. Tight ends are a critical piece. I think that people underrate them sometimes, actually. They can be a focal point of your offense. Theo Johnson has, if he can clean up the hands, stay healthy, I don't see why he can't be a really solid player for the Giants long term. I don't see why he can't be that type of player for someone like Jackson Dart, who is a gunslinger and aggressive mentality. Just to go full circle here, I think this offense is building a foundation that if things go well, if guys stay healthy, if progress ends up becoming reality, we're going to see some pretty exciting kind of features blossom from this playbook. I mean, Brian Dable's playbook has been shredded, like paper shredded, lit on fire, thrown in the freaking garbage can. That's what happened over the last couple of years. You don't have a quarterback that can throw the ball consistently or hit deep balls. You don't have a tight end who's capable of doing what you want them to do. You don't have another receiver who can run more intricate routes than just nines or goes or even dig routes, which, are important. Obviously, I think Darius Slayton is a pretty good route runner in some respects, but his hands have been very suspect at times. Jalen Hyatt's role has been basically thrown in the gutter. You can't use him unless it's a nine route, and the Giants didn't have the quarterbacks for it. So like their quarterbacking and their scheme and their playmakers, it was all a puzzle piece of different pieces. It was all different puzzles trying to be put into the same equation. It just never was going to work. Now we're starting to see, okay, like Russell Wilson is good at throwing the deep ball. Jalen Hyatt's good at catching the deep ball. Darius Slayton's good at catching the deep ball. Neighbors is good at catching the deep ball. Theo Johnson's good up the seams on the deep ball. Like now you're seeing the puzzle, like at least it looks like the same puzzle. It's not 14 different puzzles they're trying to build into one. It is the same puzzle now. So I think that from that perspective, things should progress. They're going to lay the foundation. And then Jackson Dart will take over, who had one of the best deep balls in college football last year. So I do think that he has a lot of traits that will translate to this offensive system. But I just want to kind of talk about Theo Johnson here. I know it's a little bit of a dead period for the offseason news and whatnot. I know, Joe Shane spoke to, Kay Adams on the Up and Adams show and had some things to say. Gabe Davis, they want to sign him. They took him out to dinner. They introduced him to the staff. So, I mean, you don't do that unless you really want to bring somebody in. I would love to bring in Gabe Davis personally. I think he would be a very solid backup piece. I know he was, caught with an injury designation, a failed one at that. So, I do believe that when you're looking at the situation at hand for the Giants, I think Davis is a fine depth piece. Let him compete. It's a basically win-win scenario. Worst case, you just cut him and he's next to no cost, right? He's not going to break the bank. And he's a very proven player and he does have some value in my opinion. So, that's one of the things he spoke about. They're not going to make any announcements now, but Gabe Davis could be someone that they do bring in if things go well over the next couple of days. We'll see what happens. We'll obviously keep you guys updated on the Fireside Giants channel. But always happy to hear your opinions and perspectives below. Do you think Theo Johnson is one of those guys that could break out? Based on what I saw last year, I think so, with more consistency from the quarterback position, a little bit more health from Johnson himself, and cleaning up the drops is another big one. So, obviously excited to hear your thoughts. Happy to have a good conversation in the comment section. As always, my friends, make sure you drop a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify, like and subscribe on the YouTube channel. I'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Giants episode.
Perfect.